We talk a lot about kids who grew up without a parent, the ones whose mum or dad left or passed away or simply wasn't in the picture. But there's another kind of absence that almost nobody talks about. It's the parent who was there, physically, every single day, sitting on the same couch, eating at the same table, and somehow still gone. Think about it. Maybe your dad came home from work every night, but he disappeared behind a newspaper or a phone the second he walked through the door. Maybe your mum was in the room, but her mind was somewhere else. Tired, distracted, drowning in her own stress, her own sadness, her own version of survival. You learned, without anyone ever saying it out loud, that being in the same house wasn't the same thing as being seen. And here's the part that stings the most. You probably didn't even register it as a loss at the time. You just adjusted. You got quieter, you got easier. You stopped asking twice for things because the first time already told you what you needed to know. A study published in the Journal of Family Psychology found that children who experience consistent emotional unavailability from a caregiver, even in the absence of any other visible harm, show attachment patterns nearly identical to children who experienced physical abandonment. Same wiring, same nervous system response. Just a quieter kind of wound. Think about how strange that actually is. Two kids could have completely different childhoods on paper. One grew up with a parent who left and never came back. The other grew up with a parent who was home every single night, tucked them in, showed up to school pickup. And yet psychologically, both kids can walk away with the exact same core belief. I am on my own here. Because it was never really about physical presence. It was always about whether someone was emotionally reachable when it mattered. And the tricky part is, this kind of absence is almost impossible to point to. There's no single event you can blame, no dramatic story to tell people when they ask about your childhood. Just a long accumulation of small moments. A question that went unanswered, a hug that felt automatic instead of warm, a not now that turned into 1,000 not nows until you just stopped asking. But here's what's fascinating. Your brain didn't know the difference between gone and here but unreachable. To a developing nervous system, both register as the same signal. I cannot rely on this person to meet my needs. And once that signal gets sent enough times, your brain does something remarkable. It adapts. It builds you a workaround. That workaround usually looks like independence. Hyper-independence, if we're being precise. You became the kid who didn't cry when you fell, because crying never got you picked up any faster anyway. You became the kid who learned to make your own snack, walk yourself to the bus stop, sort out your own problems. Because waiting for someone else to notice felt worse than just handling it yourself. Maybe you remember a specific moment, standing at the window, watching for a car that came home late, or didn't come home the way you needed it to, or sitting at the dinner table, saying something you thought was funny or important, and watching it land on a parent who wasn't really listening. You learned to shrink your bids for attention down to almost nothing, because big bids just meant big disappointments. Maybe it was smaller than that even. Learning to read a parent's face before you walked into a room, so you'd know whether it was safe to ask for something or better to just stay quiet. Learning to time your requests. Not right after work, not when the TV was on, not when they seemed tired, which, if you're honest, was most of the time. You became fluent in a language no one ever taught you, reading moods, managing timing, making yourself small enough to not be a burden. Here's what nobody tells you about that kind of childhood. It doesn't just affect how you saw your parent. It rewires how you approach every relationship that comes after. As an adult, you probably pride yourself on not needing much from people. You don't ask for help easily. You don't like relying on anyone. Because some part of you, somewhere underneath the surface, still believes that relying on someone is how you get hurt. You've likely been called low maintenance or so easygoing or surprisingly independent for your age. And you probably wore that like a compliment, even though it was actually a scar with really good PR. But here's what's even stranger. That same independence that protected you as a kid can quietly sabotage you now. In relationships, you might struggle to voice what you actually need, because some old part of you has already decided that needing things is pointless, or embarrassing, or dangerous. You might find yourself pulling away right when someone gets close. Not because you don't want them there, but because closeness feels unfamiliar in a way that your body reads as You may also notice you're drawn to people who are a little emotionally unavailable themselves. Not because you enjoy the pain, but because unavailability feels like home. It's a frequency you already know how to survive. Familiar, even when it's not good for you. There's actually a name for this pattern in attachment research. Repetition compulsion. It's the tendency to unconsciously recreate the emotional conditions of childhood, not because you want to suffer again, but because your nervous system is trying over and over to finally get a different outcome from a familiar situation. You're not choosing unavailable people because you enjoy being ignored. You're choosing them because some old part of you is still trying to win a game it never got to finish. And this shows up in smaller ways too, not just romantic relationships. Maybe you're the friend who never initiates plans, because some part of you is quietly testing whether people will remember you without a reminder. Maybe you downplay your achievements, because celebrating yourself feels safer than hoping someone else will do it for you. And being let down, maybe you over-apologize for taking up space, because taking up space used to come with consequences you couldn't predict. This is where it gets a bit heavier. So stay with me for a second. Kids who grow up learning to manage a parent's mood, or fill an emotional gap the parent left behind, often become what psychologists call parentified. You may have grown up feeling responsible for keeping the peace, for reading the room before anyone else did, for being the calm one, the helpful one, the one who never caused trouble. That's not a personality trait. That's a job you were handed too early, and you never got to clock out. Sometimes it looked like emotionally caretaking the very parent who was absent, cheering them up when they were low, reassuring them everything was fine, becoming the one who held things together in a house where the adult was supposed to be doing that job. And because you did it so well, no one ever thought to ask if you were okay too. You became the reliable one, the low-maintenance one, the kid teachers described as so mature for their age, which, if you unpack it, usually just means a child who stopped acting like a child a little too soon. But here's the reframe, and it's the important part. None of this happened because something was wrong with you. Your independence, your self-sufficiency, your ability to function without leaning on anyone, none of that is a character flaw. It's evidence that you adapted brilliantly to an environment that didn't give you consistency. Your nervous system did exactly what it was supposed to do. It kept you safe with the resources you had. The problem was never that you learned to survive on your own. The problem is that you're still doing it, even now, in rooms full of people who would actually show up for you if you let them. The survival strategy that once protected a child with very limited options is the same strategy quietly keeping a grown adult, with far more options, at arm's length from the people who actually want to get close. So if you've spent your whole adult life being the strong one, the fine one, the one who doesn't need anything, it might be worth asking yourself a quiet question. Not what's wrong with me, but what did I have to become back then in order to feel okay? Because once you can name that, you get to decide whether it's still serving you now or whether it's just an old habit dressed up as a personality. You didn't imagine it. The absence was real, even if no one else could see it. And you're allowed to want more now, even if you learned a long time ago to want less. If this explains something you've been carrying for a long time, it might help someone else feel a little less alone too. Hit subscribe if you want more videos like this one. And if you've ever caught yourself doing this, there's another video on this channel about why it's so hard to accept help, even when you need it. Go watch that one next.